Hello everybody, my name is Robius and welcome to a new episode of Assassin's Creed: The Real History. In this series, I compare events in a selected character's life within one of the Assassin's Creed games to the actual history the individual lived through. As always, beware of major story spoilers. For today's episode, we will be exploring the history of Jack Rackham. To begin this video, we will be overviewing his pre-game history to better understand his past, then his in-game history, which we see in Assassin's Creed 4, and lastly we will analyze the differences between what happens in the game to the real historical events. Unfortunately, there isn't very much information available concerning the man known as Jack or John Rackham's pre-game history. Essentially, it is simply considered that he was born in the 1680s somewhere in England. He evidently had gained some kind of sailing experience during either his adolescence or perhaps his adult life, because the first official record of his life lists him as the quartermaster on Charles Vane's sloop named the Ranger in 1718. This was around the time period where we first met Jack Rackham in AC4. It is estimated that he joined Charles Vane's crew following the arrival of Governor Woodes Rogers in Nassau. When the governor offered the king's pardon and Vane refused, the disgruntled pirate recruited a bloodthirsty and violent crew, which included Rackham, and together they lit a ship on fire and managed to force the British man-o'-wars to move out of the way just enough for them to escape. Rackham, who received the nickname Calico Jack due to his taste in brightly colored Indian clothing, soon rose to the ranks of Vane's crew. This segment was rather similarly represented in AC4. However, they depicted Vane arriving with Jack in Nassau, although due to the historical vagueness of the period, it is quite possible that this was accurate. The game then went on to display their escape from Nassau with the aid of Edward Kenway. However, Assassin's Creed demonstrated that they successfully destroyed the British man-o'-war, when in reality they simply forced it to move enough for them to escape. However, back in the real history, after sailing with Vane for some time and having respectable success as pirates, they eventually accidentally attacked a massive French man-o'-war. Vane forced his crew to retreat, to the displeasure of the majority of his men. Rackham tried to contest his captain's decision, but was told by Vane that his word was final. Within the following days, Rackham called a vote, in which 75 of Vane's 90 men sided with Jack Rackham and branded Vane a coward. The men decided that Jack Rackham would be their new captain, and so they took the larger of their vessels and gave Vane and his 15 supporters some supplies and the smaller ship. This part was somewhat differently represented in Assassin's Creed, as Rackham left Edward and Vane to die alone on a vessel, but altogether it made for an enjoyable scene.
Damn it, Vane!
Oh, Charles, what a surly devil you are.
Don't fuck with me, Jack.
Oh, but it's my mandate to fuck with you, Charles. Lads! See, the boys and I had a bit of counsel while you were wasting time with this lot, and, well, they figured I'd be a fitter captain than you reckless dogs.
I'll cut you another cunt, Tracer!
This one I figure I might sell for a tenner down in Kingston, but with you two grog blossoms, I can't take any chances.
You regret this day, Rackham.
I regret most of them already. Tie them up! Cast them off.
Rackham proceeded to capture multiple smaller vessels and a few larger ships in the West Indies. By 1719, he sailed back to Nassau and decided to accept the king's pardon offered by Woodes Rogers. Evidently though, like most of his fellow pirates, his respect for the pardon soon ran out, and in December he captured a merchant vessel named the Kingston near Port Royal. Unfortunately for him, he was spotted by some wealthy merchants committing this crime, and they sent bounty hunters after him when he anchored his ships at Isla de los Pinos. The bounty hunters soon attacked, and although Rackham and his men managed to get away by running into the woods on the island, their new ship was taken away from them. Later that year, Rackham and his men were at a small town in Cuba, outfitting a recently captured vessel, when a Spanish warship that had just captured an enemy English vessel came into dock and recognized some of the pirates. Luckily for Rackham, low tide quickly arrived, and the Spanish were unable to reach the pirates. When night fell, Rackham and his men got into rowboats and made their way to the captured English vessels and overpowered the Spanish guards on board. When the sun came up, the Spanish began firing on Rackham's empty ship, while he and his crew fled in the British vessel they had just taken over. Afterwards, they returned to Nassau, where Rackham went to speak to Woodes Rogers and explained that it was Vane who forced him and his crew to be pirates, threatening a penalty of death. Since Rogers had a deep-seated hatred of Vane since his escape, he believed Rackham and gave him amnesty. While in Nassau, Rackham had an affair with Anne Bonny, who was married to the sailor James Bonny, who worked for Rogers. When her husband discovered the truth, Anne was brought to the governor, who ordered she be whipped for adultery. After this punishment, Rackham offered to buy Anne from her husband, but she refused to be sold. Soon after, Jack and Anne ran away together, stole a sloop, and returned to piracy. After 2 months of crime, Anne became pregnant and moved to Cuba to have her and Jack's child. Following the child's birth, she returned to piracy and met Mary Reed, a new member of Jack Rackham's crew, who dressed as a man to hide her sex. She eventually shared her secret with Anne, who had developed an attraction to her. Rackham soon grew jealous of all the attention Bonnie was giving Reed, and so he threatened to kill her. At this point, Mary revealed that she was a woman, and that Jack did not need to fear for his relationship with Anne. Rackham then became one of the most iconic pirates of the period, due to both his flag, the Jolly Roger, and for being the first pirate to openly have 2 women as members of his crew. This entire series of events was interestingly represented in Assassin's Creed, as Edward spied on them through the observatory. Eventually, however, Rackham's piracy came to an end when he and his crew began terrorizing fishermen around Jamaica. When they anchored their ships following some attacks, the men began to drink on shore at Bry Harbor Bay and were soon attacked by the pirate hunter Jonathan Barnett. Rackham and his men hid, but history states that Mary Reed and Anne Bonny stood and fought. They were soon all captured and brought to Port Royal, where they were sentenced to death. Bonny and Reed escaped the sentence temporarily due to their pregnancies, but Rackham and the rest of the crew were hung for piracy. Following his death, Jack's body was put in a gibbet and hung on a small island in the harbor as a symbol against piracy. This place became known as Rackham's Cay and was actually featured at the beginning of Pirates of the Caribbean. In summary, there were a few differences between Jack Rackham's actual life and his representation in AC4. First, Assassin's Creed depicted his takeover of Vane's ship as a spiteful one where he left Vane to die, when in reality he simply took over the larger portion of his crew, but still allowed Vane and his men a chance for safety. Secondly, and this is more of a subjective difference, AC4 never indicated that Anne had their first child. Instead, it implied that she served with Rackham until their capture, and that she gave birth to their second child while in prison. Other than these minor and partially subjective differences, Jack Rackham's history was accurately depicted in Assassin's Creed 4. And on that note, we have wrapped up another episode of Assassin's Creed: The Real History. I hope you have all enjoyed this video, and if you did, I highly recommend you try out one of the Assassin's Creed games. Thank you all for watching. Please leave any suggestions for future characters you'd like me to cover in the comment section below. Please rate, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all in a future historical episode.